We now continue with our Budget Day review, and we're looking at the tax implications of Budget 2015. Minister Nene has said that the 2015 budget tax proposals aim to increase tax revenues as required, limit the erosion of corporate tax base, increase incentives for small businesses, and promote a greener activity. With me in studio to explore the tax implications are Russell Smith, Tax Director of Ernst & Young. Welcome, Russell.
Hello.
And Keith Engel, Deputy CEO of the South African Institute of Tax Practitioners. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Russell, let's get straight to it. What are your thoughts? Was there anything in particular that stood out for you in terms of the tax implications of Budget 2015?
Well, what struck me as quite odd was the lack of more broad-based increases. Whereas there's an increase in personal income tax and the fuel levy, nothing to do with VAT, no increase on dividends tax, no CGT increases, no state duty increases. So it was a relatively light touch, and I think that'll come as quite a relief, actually, especially to high net worth people.
I think people were expecting, specifically the high net worth people, were expecting pre-budget to be hit quite a lot harder than what they were.
Absolutely. And that's why I say I think there'll be quite a bit of a relief, actually. The 1% is a relatively light touch.
But how is that going to affect the income that is so greatly needed?
Well, they've managed to balance the budget somehow. There was about a 17 million shortfall on collections this year, which is not a huge figure. And there's a projected deficit next year of about, what is it, 3.9%, or 16 billion on revenue. Those are not absolutely huge numbers. And they've managed to sort of balance the budget without huge increases, which is actually quite a relief.
Keith, do you agree that this is quite a balanced budget?
Well, I mean, it's balanced in the sense you're balancing the budget, the revenue, and the expenditure. I think the point that Russell's making is absolutely correct. The point is that 12 billion sounds a lot of money to us, but to government overall it isn't that much. And what they did is they tried to spread it around. They went after personal income tax. They didn't go for the 2%. I think that was what a lot of people felt. They went to 1%, but it goes deeper down. So that made the number smaller, because if you had a 2%, you might have hit it at higher levels, 1.5 or 2 million rand. It looks like it's going to be felt deeper down to 1 million and below. So that is affecting it. The other thing to note is the fuel levy, and that the excise levies, there are various ones, like the electricity levy went up. So there are a number of it, they're spreading around in different ways so you don't feel it quite as much. So it starts to add up. They will get to the 12 billion, but that's where they did it. Personal income tax and excise with an element of environmental taxation in there.
Some people are saying that the minister was not aggressive enough in the spreading around of it. What are your thoughts on that, Russell?
I think he did a good job. There were some comments from the EFS that company taxes were left flat, which is a bad thing. Obviously, we don't agree with that. No, I don't think he was. The fact that he wasn't more aggressive with tax increases, I think, is a very good thing.
Is there anything in particular that stood out for you in terms of the personal tax and how it will be affecting man on the street, Russell?
I think the increases will be nominal. I mean, if they drew a line at 450,000 rand, so that if you're below that, you will actually be slightly better off. If you're above that, there will be an increase of 1% reduced by the bracket adjustment. So I would suggest that that's a fairly nominal effect.
Yeah.
Keith, any other thoughts on the tax implications of 2015?
Well, I think really just a more overall point is what struck me in the budget is the minister was trying to reverse a bad news story and make it a good news story. So just on the first point on revenue, look, I think they made the calculations. They've chosen a lot of rate things so that tax increases they know will come through. So they didn't do it in a lot of subtle ways. So I think the funding will come through. I think the real issue is on the expenditure side, whether the expenditure cuts are credible, and that's going to be the issue for the IMF and the rest. That's where the credibility problem is. But the other thing you consistently see is while they were doing an increase, overall in this budget, incentives for small business, we're trying to help the poor, we're trying to help growth. So there's a lot of effort and a lot of small initiatives to show you that they're doing everything they can, and it can show you that the Minister of Finance feels very constrained. He wants growth, he does not want to deter investment, both domestic or foreign, yet he's got to raise revenue. So there was a sensitivity that went throughout the whole speech.
A sensitivity, and again, a sense of not wanting to upset anything, not want to upset any particular sector. But do you think that sort of passive stance, for want of a better phrase, is going to catch up with us, Russell?
I don't think so. there was quite a lot of emphasis on green relief, although interestingly there was quite an interesting comment that there was an allocation towards the regulation around fracking and so on, so there was kind of a nod in that direction which kind of goes against the green theme. But quite a lot of emphasis on relief and enhanced electricity levy and at the same time tax relief on energy savings or electricity savings. So I think that'll be very welcome across the board as well.
Keith, tell me, what are your thoughts on the temporary increase in the electricity levy?
Well, you see, that was part of the delay in the carbon tax. I think there's been a push to get that carbon tax going, but they keep holding back for various reasons. So a temporary measure is to up the electricity levy, which is acting as a preliminary proxy for that carbon tax. And again, you're seeing a little bit of what Pravin Gordhan was doing. We're not increasing taxes, we're stopping you from sinning. So we're going after alcohol, going after cigarettes. There are new type of environmental levies of all sorts in there, and the electricity levy being one of them. Now the issue is that they're trying to sell it as an environmental thing. The question is, people feeling the way they do about electricity right now, was that a smart move? But again, the moves in tax, as Russell suggests, are as far as you need to go.
Okay.
They covered the gap. The real problem again is their credibility on the expenditure side.
Something that stood out for me, Russell, I'm just going to read it verbatim. We are also taking further steps to combat financial leakages, which deprive our economy of billions of rands through erosion of the tax base, profit shifting, and illicit money flows. I love that he touched on that. I love that he mentioned that. What does that say to you?
Well, what he's doing is he's lending a lot of support to the Davis Committee recommendations on base erosion. There's a lot of focus on this. It's a good thing. Actually, South Africa already has a lot of legislation in that space. They have good transfer pricing legislation. What they lack is the ability to implement it really effectively. And one of the recommendations, and I think he's supporting that, is that they need to bulk up the transfer duty capability of SARS in order to carry out effective investigations, which are not easy to do. So I think he's just lending his support to that whole base erosion initiative.
Also, something that again stood out, which we've already actually touched on, is the fact that he's gone out of his way to ensure that the burden is fairly distributed. Who do you think, if one could phrase it this way, was the worst off of the budget?
I would say, well,
taxpayers doesn't seem to be coming off too badly at all. So,
well, I mean, they had a 1% increase. So your upper middle class and your wealthy are getting hit there, and again the fuel levy is going up. So the low income, again, they're trying to show that everybody's sharing the burden. And if there's enough sharing, it's not. It may not be as sensational, but at least you're not angering certain parts of the population. So I do think they tried to minimize it as best they could. But again, we're going to feel it somewhere. There's going to be a hole in our pocket, and we're not going to quite sure know where it went.
do we know when, Russell?
When what?
When we might start feeling the effects?
Well, individuals will start feeling it with effect from next month, March. And the fuel levy will kick in more or less immediately as well.
See, you've actually been feeling it all along, because what happens is inflation goes up. Your taxes have been quietly going up over the course of the year. What the minister is supposed to do, if the economy was good, is he's supposed to reverse all that inflation from February, March. So you've been feeling on the personal income tax for a while. The 1% you'll feel immediately from 1 March, certain people anyway, the upper income.
So just to round up, Russell, what did you think of the
Overall,
budget?
very good. I'm very relieved, actually, that it wasn't more dramatic than it really is.
After the state of the nation, the state of the province?
And all the hype leading up to this particular speech as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we are relieved, and I think the point that Russell mentions is that the $12 billion wasn't as hard for him to cover. So on that side, I think we're all relieved. Again, the worry is the expenditure side credible? That is the question. And that we will see over a period of months or a year or two.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your input on this budget 2015. Stay tuned. We're going for a short break, and then we'll be back to look at labour and small business enterprises in terms of budget 2015.